When we talk about silent prejudice, most people imagine loud insults, obvious discrimination, or overt hostility. But the truth is, the most dangerous form of prejudice is rarely shouted. It whispers. It hides behind polite smiles, professional uniforms, and scripted customer service voices. It shows up in the slight tightening of someone's eyes, the forced politeness that feels colder than disrespect, or the casual dismissal that tells you they've already judged who you are without knowing anything about you. And in moments like the one this VIP passenger faced, silent prejudice becomes louder than any insult ever could. It was there in the way the gate agent looked at him, not with curiosity, not with recognition, but with that familiar flicker of assumption. The kind of assumption that tries to shrink a person before they even speak. The kind of assumption that comes from seeing the color of someone's skin before seeing the content of their character. Silent prejudice doesn't erupt like a volcano, it seeps like poison. It slips into the pauses between words, the delays that shouldn't have happened, the tone that suddenly shifts when the person approaches the counter. It's the cold stare that follows someone's every step, waiting to find a flaw, waiting to confirm a stereotype, waiting to justify a disrespectful attitude that was decided long before the interaction even started. And in this story, that silent prejudice began the moment the gate agent looked at the boarding pass, then looked at the man holding it, as if the two didn't belong together. As if elite status, business class, or VIP privileges had somehow slipped into the wrong hands. These are the moments that test a person's patience. They test dignity. They test one's belief in fairness. Because when someone treats you poorly without saying a word, it creates a tension that others feel but pretend not to notice. The passengers standing nearby sensed it. The small pause, the unnecessary questioning, the slow scanning of his documents, details that normally take seconds stretched into humiliating minutes. And yet, the man remained calm. His composure wasn't an act, it was a lifetime of practice. A lifetime of learning that reacting with anger only feeds the bias, while responding with dignity exposes it. Silent prejudice thrives when people assume no one is watching. When they believe their actions are small enough to go unnoticed. But those who have lived through it, who have felt it in schools, workplaces, stores, and airports, recognize it instantly. They can feel it in the air, a subtle tightening, a faint shift in energy. And this man felt it the moment he approached the desk. Not because he was hypersensitive, not because he was imagining things, but because silent prejudice follows predictable patterns. The dismissive glance. The clipped tone. The refusal to acknowledge his status, his presence, or his rightful place in line. But here's the thing about silent prejudice, it always reveals more about the person showing it than the person receiving it. It exposes insecurities, assumptions, and a lack of understanding. It shows how quickly people judge a book by a cover they never took the time to read. And the gate agent, without realizing it, was unveiling every flaw in her character through her behavior. She didn't need to shout to be disrespectful, the disrespect was in the pauses, the hesitation, the undermining smirk as she insisted the seat must have been assigned by mistake. Yet what she didn't see was the strength in the man standing before her. A strength not built from wealth or power but from years of fighting battles others never witnessed. Silent prejudice had tried to define him his entire life, and every time, he chose to rise above it, not by ignoring it, but by refusing to let it dictate his worth. He understood that reacting impulsively would only satisfy the expectations someone like this gate agent already had. So he stood tall, answered her unnecessary questions, and handed over the documents she kept asking for, even when she knew she'd already seen them. This is the reality countless people face daily. They walk into rooms where their presence is questioned, step into lines where they are subtly pushed back, or enter spaces where their competence is doubted before they speak a single word. This kind of prejudice doesn't scream, it assumes. It assumes someone doesn't belong in a VIP line. It assumes someone can't afford a first-class ticket. It assumes someone isn't educated enough, successful enough, or important enough, simply based on appearance. And these assumptions create barriers that don't look like walls but feel like them. Silent prejudice is powerful because it pretends to be harmless. It hides under policies, procedures, and customer service phrases. But beneath the surface, it chips away at people's confidence, dignity, and sense of safety. And unless confronted, whether by truth, awareness, or karma, it continues unchecked. In this moment at the gate, silent prejudice believed it had the upper hand. It believed it could undermine a man without consequence, without witnesses, without accountability. But what it didn't know was that truth was only seconds away from exposing it in the most unexpected way. Dignity is something people often misunderstand. They mistake it for silence, for weakness, for passivity. But dignity is one of the most powerful shields a person can carry, especially when standing face to face with disrespect. In the moment this VIP passenger encountered the gate agent's attitude, he didn't raise his voice, he didn't argue, and he didn't let frustration take control. Instead, he did something far stronger. He held on to his dignity with both hands, knowing that losing it would mean giving the disrespect exactly what it wanted. Dignity is not about pretending the insult doesn't hurt, it's about refusing to let the insult dictate your behavior. And in this story, every second that passed revealed just how much strength a calm man can possess when the world expects him to break. The gate agent, with her clipped tone and dismissive eyes, expected a reaction. She expected irritation, defensiveness, maybe even anger. Because people who judge others based on appearance quietly rely on those reactions to justify their behavior. When someone they underestimate responds emotionally, it gives them ammunition, it confirms the stereotype they held, lets them believe their bias was valid, and allows them to feel superior even when they were in the wrong. But this man understood the trap far too well. He understood the psychology behind prejudice, the silent expectation of failure, and the way some individuals try to provoke reactions in order to maintain control. And so he did what experience had taught him, he anchored himself in dignity, letting calmness become his greatest form of resistance. There's something incredibly powerful about a person who refuses to be shaken. The more she questioned him unnecessarily, the calmer he became. The more she tried to belittle him through tone and implication, the more confident he stood. That kind of grace isn't something you learn overnight, it comes from a lifetime of navigating spaces where people underestimate you before you say a single word. It comes from rising above assumptions, not once or twice, but countless times, until you've built a shield so strong it reflects prejudice back onto the person showing it. Dignity also carries a quiet authority. The passengers around them noticed it. They noticed how he didn't snap, how he didn't match the gate agent's attitude, how he didn't allow her cold tone to change his. And silently, many of them began to question her behavior. It's always easier for observers to dismiss tension when both sides are heated. But when only one person is being disrespectful and the other stands steady, the unspoken truth reveals itself. That's when witnesses begin to understand who is really in the wrong. And dignity becomes the spotlight that exposes mistreatment without the dignified person having to say a word. Moments like these show that dignity isn't passive, it's strategic. It's the decision to protect your peace when someone is trying to steal it. It's the choice to demonstrate self-respect when someone is trying to undermine it. And more importantly, it's the refusal to give up your power. The gate agent believed she had the upper hand simply because she controlled the check-in desk, the boarding scanner, and the authority of the airline. But the truth is, real power is not found in job titles or computer screens. Real power is in how you carry yourself, how you handle pressure, and how you respond when someone tries to strip you of your value. The man knew something the gate agent did not: the way you handle mistreatment says more about you than the mistreatment itself. When he kept his composure, it wasn't because he accepted the disrespect. It was because he refused to let it define him. He refused to let her assumptions decide his identity. He refused to let a stranger's attitude dictate the worth he had already earned through years of hard work, sacrifice, education, and perseverance. There's a deep strength in that kind of refusal, one that is not loud, but deeply rooted. Dignity also has a way of unsettling the person trying to provoke you. The longer the man remained calm, the more unsettled the gate agent became. Her smirk faded. Her confidence wavered. She double-checked the system, not because she thought it might have an error, but because his unshakable calm made her uneasy. It made her question whether she had misjudged him, whether she had crossed a line, whether the assumptions she relied on so casually were about to backfire. That's the thing about dignity, it doesn't need to fight back to win. It simply stands firm until the truth exposes itself. And then there's the deeper meaning of dignity, it's an act of self-preservation. It reminds you that no matter how someone treats you, your inner worth remains untouched. People can question your status, your seat, your success, your competence, even your presence, but they cannot touch your dignity unless you hand it to them. And this man refused to hand it over. He held it close, like armor, knowing that the moment he allowed someone else's behavior to control his own, he would lose more than just a seat on the plane. He would lose a part of himself that took a lifetime to build. Power is a strange thing. People who believe they have it often cling to it like a lifeline, while those who truly carry it rarely feel the need to show it. In that terminal, in front of that gate desk, the balance of power seemed simple on the surface. The gate agent had the authority, the rules, the computer system, and the ability to decide who boarded when. She assumed that gave her the upper hand. She assumed the man standing in front of her was powerless, that his calmness was submission, and that his politeness was an attempt to avoid confrontation. But what she didn't realize was how quickly the illusion of power can collapse when the truth enters the room. And in moments like these, truth doesn't arrive with fanfare, it arrives quietly, like a tide sweeping in, shifting the ground beneath someone who thought they were standing on solid rock. She kept him waiting longer than necessary, holding his boarding pass between her fingers as if she was doing him a favor by even acknowledging him. She kept typing, pretending to check the system, even though she already knew her doubts weren't based on errors but on assumptions. She wanted control. She wanted the upper hand. She wanted him to feel small. But the calm way he stood there, not begging, not pushing, not raising his voice, began to change something she didn't expect. Instead of making her feel powerful, his composure made her feel exposed. The authority she thought she held began to wobble, not because he challenged her, but because his confidence silently questioned the foundation her attitude stood on. Power flips in moments like this, not through confrontation, but through truth revealing itself. And the truth walked into the scene the moment another staff member approached, carrying information the gate agent never anticipated. There is always a natural shift in energy when someone with real authority enters a situation. It doesn't have to be loud or dramatic, it's simply felt. Passengers straighten their posture. Voices lower. And those who have been acting out of arrogance suddenly recognize their own vulnerability. The man noticed this shift, not because he expected rescue, but because he recognized the look on the agent's face, the subtle panic hidden behind professionalism, the quick glance around, the slight tightening of her jaw. She knew something was changing, something she could no longer control. The staff member looked at the man with respect, not hesitation. And in that moment, the entire dynamic flipped. The gate agent, who moments earlier held all the power she thought mattered, suddenly felt the weight of scrutiny. Her behavior, which she believed was invisible, was no longer hidden. Her assumptions were no longer safe. And her confidence, which thrived on the belief that no one would question her actions, began to crumble. Truth has a way of doing that, it exposes the difference between actual authority and the fragile illusion of authority built on bias. When the truth of the man's identity was revealed, it wasn't shouted. It wasn't announced dramatically. It was stated plainly, with the kind of respect reserved for someone who had earned it. And that simple acknowledgement carried more power than anything the gate agent had tried to use against him. She realized instantly that the person she had been belittling wasn't just a passenger. He wasn't someone trying to sneak into a seat he didn't deserve. He wasn't someone she could push aside or question without consequence. He was someone whose accomplishments, status, and reputation carried weight, real weight, not the artificial kind assigned by a desk position and a uniform. Power flipped in an instant, not because he demanded it, but because truth demanded justice. And when truth steps into the light, arrogance loses its footing. The passengers who had been watching suddenly understood the situation differently. They saw the man, not through the lens the gate agent tried to impose, but through the respect he commanded naturally. And they saw the gate agent, not as a professional doing her job, but as someone who misused her role because she believed no one would challenge her. The most powerful moment, though, wasn't in the correction. It was in the silence that followed. The kind of silence where everyone knows the balance has shifted, and the person who tried to hold control now feels the weight of their actions pressing down on them. The man didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. He didn't use the moment to embarrass her. His dignity did all the work for him. And his silence in that instant felt more powerful than any confrontation ever could. This is how power truly works. It doesn't need to be shown. It doesn't need to be shouted. It simply reveals itself when necessary, standing quietly behind those who carry themselves with integrity. And when the truth stands beside a person like that, anyone who tried to diminish them suddenly finds themselves face to face with the consequences they never expected. Judging someone by appearance is one of the oldest mistakes humanity keeps repeating, and yet people still act surprised when that judgment backfires. In places like airports, where uniforms create a false sense of authority and passengers pass through like moving pieces, some individuals forget that every person standing in line carries a story, a history, and a worth that can't be measured by outward looks. The gate agent in this story didn't see the man as a VIP. She didn't see him as someone who earned his place through years of dedication. She didn't see him as someone who had achieved more than she could imagine. All she saw was her own assumption, wrapped in a narrow lens of prejudice, and she treated him according to that limited vision. This is the hidden cost of judging someone by appearance. The judgment doesn't just offend the person being targeted, it exposes the smallness of the one making the judgment. When the man approached the gate, he carried himself with calm confidence. Nothing in his body language suggested uncertainty or deceit. He wasn't fumbling with his documents or avoiding eye contact. He wasn't nervous or disruptive. He was simply present, ready to board a flight he had legitimately booked. Yet the gate agent looked at him with doubt, as if his appearance contradicted the information printed on the boarding pass. The assumption formed instantly, like a snap of fingers, and she began treating him like an intruder rather than a paying customer. That's the thing about appearance-based judgment, it doesn't wait for evidence. It doesn't seek clarification. It leaps to conclusions without a single step toward understanding. But what the gate agent failed to realize was that every time she questioned him unnecessarily, she was revealing more about herself than about the man she was judging. Prejudice clouds judgment, creating a distorted picture that the person believes is accurate. She didn't ask herself why he carried himself with such grace. She didn't wonder why he didn't get flustered. She didn't consider that maybe he belonged exactly where he stood. Her mind was so locked into her assumptions that she failed to see the truth right in front of her. There's a deeper cost to judging people by appearance: it prevents growth. It prevents learning. When someone decides who a person is before letting the person speak, they close the door on empathy, understanding, and genuine human connection. The gate agent had a chance to treat him with respect, to welcome him as a valued passenger, to demonstrate professionalism. Instead, she took the easy route, the route paved with stereotypes and shortcuts. And every shortcut taken in judgment always leads to a dead end. Passengers around her saw the shift in her tone when she realized who he really was. They witnessed the quick change from cold authority to forced politeness. And that shift told its own story, a story of someone who only offers respect when status demands it, not when humanity deserves it. That is the most revealing truth about appearance-based judgment: it shows who would treat people differently if they knew their rank, their income, their achievements. And that inconsistency is a loud reflection of weak character. The man, on the other hand, demonstrated the opposite. He didn't treat her poorly even when she treated him with dismissiveness. He didn't throw his status in her face to demand better treatment. He didn't flaunt his achievements. He simply held on to his dignity, letting her actions carve the path to her own embarrassment. When the truth came out later, the contrast between their characters became impossible to ignore. The one who judged ended up embarrassed. The one who was judged remained untouched. And that contrast created a powerful lesson for everyone who witnessed it. Judging someone by appearance robs a person of the chance to see greatness standing right in front of them. The gate agent had no idea that the man she was belittling had built companies, led teams, made differences in industries she never stepped foot in. She had no idea that he had flown more miles than she had processed boarding passes. She had no idea that he contributed more to the economy, society, and community than she could ever comprehend from her limited perspective. And yet she felt justified in doubting him solely because of how he looked. This is why appearance-based judgment is so costly, because it blinds people to potential, to accomplishments, to the true story behind a person's presence. It makes them underestimate those who have risen above obstacles they can't even imagine. It reduces rich lives to shallow assumptions. And in the end, the person who judges ends up standing in the shadow of their own ignorance, realizing too late that the person they disrespected was far greater than the picture they painted in their mind. Karma doesn't always arrive when people expect it. It doesn't rush. It doesn't warn. It waits quietly, watching every decision, every intention, every moment when someone believes their actions will go unnoticed. And then, at the perfect second, it steps forward with a precision that feels almost poetic. In this story, the gate agent believed she was untouchable. She believed her authority at the counter gave her the right to treat the man however she wished, as if her uniform was a shield that protected her from accountability. But karma was already at work the moment she chose disrespect over professionalism, the moment she allowed her assumptions to guide her actions rather than fairness, the moment she tried to belittle someone who had done absolutely nothing wrong. Karma doesn't always strike with loud punishment. Sometimes it unfolds quietly, through truth and exposure. And that's exactly what happened here. As the gate agent kept questioning the man's documents, as she continued delaying him with cold eyes and unnecessary scrutiny, she created her own downfall without realizing it. Every passerby, every staff member, every person watching was mentally recording the scene. She assumed no one noticed. But people always notice disrespect, especially when directed at someone who carries themselves with dignity. And because the man remained calm, karma's path was cleared even more. His composure allowed the truth to shine without interference, without escalation, without distraction. The moment another staff member approached with recognition in their eyes, the shift was instant. It was as if the air changed direction. Suddenly, the gate agent's confidence didn't look like confidence anymore, it looked like fear pretending to stand straight. She offered a tight smile, a hint of nervousness slipping through, trying to regain control of a situation that had already slipped through her fingers. Karma often works this way, it takes the very confidence used to mistreat someone and turns it into silent panic. When the staff member addressed the man with respect, acknowledging his VIP status and perhaps even knowing his name or reputation, the truth hit the gate agent harder than any argument ever could. It wasn't anger that exposed her behavior, it was respect given to someone she had tried so hard to undermine. That contrast revealed everything. And in that single moment, she understood exactly what karma felt like. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't violent. It was a quiet, undeniable realization that she had judged the wrong person, disrespected the wrong passenger, doubted the wrong traveler. She had tried to shrink someone who, in reality, stood far above her in achievement, experience, and character. The embarrassment that washed over her was the first wave of karma's lesson. She tried to fix her tone, tried to speak warmly, tried to correct her posture, but by then the damage was already done. The witnesses had already made their conclusions. The passengers saw how quickly she flipped her attitude once she realized his status. They saw how she changed her behavior not because she understood her mistake but because she feared consequences. And karma revealed that too, her sudden shift exposed that her respect wasn't rooted in humanity but in hierarchy. And then comes the deeper layer of karma, the one that lingers long after the moment ends. She realized that the man she tried to humiliate had remained calm not because he was powerless, but because he was powerful enough not to be shaken. She realized that the person she dismissed held influence far beyond her desk, influence that could turn her career upside down if he desired. And she realized that the dignity she tried to chip away at was stronger than any authority she thought she had. Karma also teaches through reflection. After the truth came out, she was forced to reflect on the assumptions she made, the biases she acted on, and the consequences of letting prejudice guide her decisions. Every unnecessary question she asked, every delay she imposed, every disrespectful tone she used stood in her mind like a mirror she couldn't avoid. Karma didn't need to punish her directly, it made her face her own actions. And for many, that is the hardest consequence of all. The passengers who witnessed the scene learned something too. They saw firsthand how quickly judgment can flip, how easily someone's true worth can invalidate false assumptions, and how karma doesn't need force, it simply needs truth. The man's calmness, his composure, his refusal to react gave karma the space to work perfectly. Because karma doesn't fight battles through aggression, it fights through exposure, through balance, through revealing the truth that arrogance tries to hide. And in that moment, when respect finally shifted in the direction it belonged, the entire room understood that karma had arrived not to punish him, but to protect him. And not to destroy her, but to teach her the lesson she had spent years ignoring. Sometimes a single incident does more than expose a moment of disrespect, it exposes an entire system that allowed that moment to happen in the first place. What the gate agent did wasn't just a personal mistake, it was a reflection of a larger problem that exists in many institutions, workplaces, and public spaces. When someone feels comfortable enough to act on their prejudice in broad daylight, in front of dozens of witnesses, it means the culture surrounding them has silently permitted such behavior. It means they believe there will be no consequences. And it means the bias isn't isolated, it's rooted, it's spread, and it's been ignored for far too long. The incident with this VIP passenger revealed a deeper flaw in the system, the unchecked assumptions, the subtle discrimination, and the normalized disrespect that people have learned to treat as routine. What happened at that gate wasn't the first time the agent acted this way. Her confidence made that obvious. This wasn't the behavior of someone afraid of being reprimanded, it was the behavior of someone who had gotten away with similar actions repeatedly. She didn't hesitate for a second when she chose to doubt him. She didn't question her own judgment. She didn't consider the possibility of being wrong. That level of certainty only comes from repetition. Only comes from experience. Only comes from being surrounded by a system that looks the other way. And that's where the deeper problem lies, not just in the individuals who show bias, but in the environments that fail to challenge that bias. When the truth about the passenger's identity came out, it didn't just shock the agent, it caused a ripple of realization in the people witnessing it. They began to question how many times this had happened before. How many passengers had been treated unfairly without anyone noticing. How many travelers had been silently judged for reasons that had nothing to do with their behavior. That's the impact a single incident can have, it opens eyes that were once closed, ears that were once deaf to the subtle tones of discrimination, and minds that had grown accustomed to excuses like, maybe she's just having a bad day. But a bad day doesn't justify targeted disrespect. A bad mood doesn't explain selective suspicion. Those things come from deeper roots. And this incident forced the system to confront its own reflection. The supervisor who stepped in realized this wasn't just a misunderstanding, it was a mishandling. The passengers who watched realized they had witnessed more than a disagreement, they had seen prejudice unfold step by step. And even the gate agent, though embarrassed, began to understand that her behavior had been shaped by a culture that never challenged her assumptions. Yet now, faced with accountability, she felt the discomfort she had made others feel for years. The deeper issue becomes clear when you consider how different the situation would have been if the man didn't have VIP status. If he had been an average traveler with no recognizable title, no workplace connections, no visible signs of status, would the truth have come out as quickly? Would the supervisor have stepped in at all? Would other passengers have cared? That's the uncomfortable truth the incident forces everyone to confront. Systems often correct themselves only when the affected person has enough power to demand correction. But what about those who don't? What about those who suffer in silence because they fear escalation, or because they know the system won't defend them? This incident reveals the need for deeper change, because the problem wasn't just the gate agent, it was the structure that allowed her assumptions to feel normal. And deeper change doesn't happen through apologies. It happens through awareness, accountability, and training that teaches employees to check their biases before interacting with anyone. It happens through policies that aren't just written but enforced. It happens through leadership that refuses to tolerate disrespect hidden behind customer service smiles. The man's calmness exposed the flaw even further. He didn't have to raise his voice to uncover the system's weakness. His composure acted like a mirror that reflected the unfairness back onto those responsible. And by the time the truth was revealed, the system itself stood exposed, not just the agent. That exposure is the first step toward transformation. Because once a system sees its own flaws clearly, it can no longer pretend they don't exist. It can no longer hide behind procedures or excuses. It must face the uncomfortable truth that equality in treatment is not automatic, it must be demanded, taught, reinforced, and expected at every level. And that is what a single incident can do. It can shake the foundation of complacency. It can force conversations people avoid. It can reveal prejudices that were buried under routine. And it can show that deep, systemic problems don't need hours of evidence, they can be exposed in a single moment, at a single gate, between a single agent and a single passenger who refused to lose his dignity.